builder. What is this? This is the Falconeyes RX-18TDX Mark II. It's an LED mat that you can completely submerge underwater. How much does it cost? Approximately $430. Comes with 2 diffusion modifiers depending on your needs. It's bicolor, approximately 2.5 hours of battery life with a 190 watt-hour V-mount battery. Who's it for? Product videographers that are looking to light objects underwater in a controlled water environment. Narrative filmmakers is a toss-up, because if you're going to use it directly in the rain, the control box isn't waterproof. Done! Roll that intro! What's going on, everybody? You're watching Too Long Didn't Read Filmmaker, where the answers comes first, the reasons come last, but we're constantly and always still learning. Today, we're going to find out whether or not the Falconeyes RX-18TDX Mark II, kind of a mouthful, is going to be the right solution for you and your overall filmmaking kit. And I want to thank Falconeyes for sending this out to me so I can provide you with my review today. Now, the major difference between Mark I and Mark II is that for this LED mat, they've really upped the waterproofness in Mark II to the point where you can actually submerge the whole thing into water. Whereas the Mark I, it could handle some splashes of water, but I'm pretty sure you're going to run into problems as you submerge it. Because if you take a look at the backside of the Mark II version, they really have some waterproof tubing for the power cord going into this, as well as the back of the mat. Everything is definitely made for submerging this LED panel. Unfortunately, due to the waterproofing, this LED mat is no longer as foldable as it once was in version 1. So, without further ado, coming in at $430, you're going to get yourself quite a bit with this kit. You're going to get the light itself, the mounting bracket, a carrying case, but you're also going to get a softbox grid attachment as well as a lantern attachment, depending on how you actually want to use this light. Now, this specific version, they have much bigger panels and even a smaller one. This one is approximately a 1x2. It's a 100 watt bicolored panel, and your color temperatures range from 3000 to 5600 K. And in terms of how it's transitioning between the color Kelvin, it doesn't seem to bump up in brightness once you get to 4200, let's say, when you're mixing the two LEDs. It smoothly transitions across, which depending on your needs might actually be a good thing. And lastly, for people that want to do some very basic lighting effects with a bicolor panel, you do have stuff like lightning, paparazzi, some warm glow, very basic stuff, nothing to write home about like an RGB panel would. So, without further ado, let's get to the light output, the color quality tests, and see how well does this LED mat does. Looking at the light output tests, we can see that it doesn't matter what color temperature we're in, we seem to be hitting around the same light output on the waveforms and a little bit of variation in the lux, which means if you are going to be dimming or changing the color temperature, it's going to do it smoothly instead of jumping up in overall light output. Next, let's take a look at the color quality. The 5600K definitely performs the best, hitting pretty much all the color chips it's supposed to, including the skin tones, whereas the tungsten 3000K doesn't do any favors with the reds and the skins leaning towards yellow. When you change it to 3200K tungsten, it's still exhibiting the same problems. The skin and the reds are all the way towards yellow. And if you mix everything to 4300K, it performs pretty much the same as 5600K when you're mixing everything. When it comes to battery life, they all end at approximately 2.5 hours, which basically means that it is using the same amount of power no matter which color Kelvin you're at. For this test, I am sitting 2 feet away from the wall with a light source approximately 3 feet away. This is the bare LED, so check out my shadow on the wall to see what each modifier does. As we add the softbox here, it does a better wraparound, so the shadow on the wall decreases, but we do need to up the overall light output to compensate. When you add the grid in front of the softbox, we do see an increase in the shadow, and that's simply because the light is more directional now. Once we put the lantern on, there's much more wrap going on, and the shadow really dissipates, even me being super close to the wall. Here we have the bare LED as well as the other light modifiers all side by side, so you can see a nice direct comparison. So what's the bottom line here? Is the version 2 of Falconeyes' very popular LED mats something you should be thinking about for your overall kit? And this is definitely a yes and a no situation, because I would classify this LED mat as a specialized lighting tool simply because of its nature of being submerged underwater. So I'll give you an example real quick, but basically, if you don't have to work with water in terms of submerging the thing, then you probably should go with a version 1, because it can handle some drizzle if water happens to get onto it, but it doesn't have these extra things that's protruding out of it to make the version 2 waterproof. So things like this backside, this tube coming out for the power, as well as the plastic brackets, this doesn't make it easy for you to gaff it onto the wall itself. Yes, it will work, but it's not going to stick flush like the version 1. So that is something to think about if you are thinking about just placing these onto walls themselves. So let's talk about the specialized part of this light. Now, I have filmed in a water scene before, specifically a rain scene. This movie is actually out now on Amazon. It's called Immortal: Combat the Code. It used to be called Wuxia 2 the Code, and I specifically DP'd the rain scene. So, in terms of what we did for the rain scene, we did have this little rain machine, very DIY. A hose went into it and it spritzed out a very nice amount of water for where the actors were. In terms of how I lit the scene, the LED panels and the one tungsten 2K was nowhere near the water. It was actually on the roof of the building right back here, shining into the scene. So this achieved two things for me. One, I didn't have to worry about the lights getting wet. Two, it lit a rain scene the way you're supposed to light it, which is you do need to have some backlight so people can actually see the raindrops. And three, because the light was so high up and out of the rain's way, basically the camera operators had free range of going anywhere they needed to grab the shot. So that's how we lit the scene. Now, if I had this Falconeyes LED panel, would I have lit the scene any different? And I would say no. There's literally no reason for me to actually introduce the LED right into the rain based on how we filmed it and lit it. It's exactly what I would have done in any case. However, let's say we were blessed with actual rain, so what do we do now? In that case, yes, I would use these Falconeyes version 2s because it's going to be rained on the whole time. However, the hard part here is that because the control box itself is not waterproof, you're probably going to need to get either a waterproof bag, maybe a cooler, or some sort of contraption to place the control box in to avoid rain actually getting drenched onto it. And this is something I wished Falconeyes would have been able to do to waterproof the control box in terms of all its electronics, as well as the battery being attached to it. But I also understand why they didn't. Because if they did, the whole control box would need to be one very large and heavy aluminum heat sink, essentially, to lock all the parts in there and to dissipate heat. Because this control box will heat up, not to uncomfortable rounds, but it will heat up. So that's something that it would have made everything much more expensive, and I get why they didn't do it, but it also would be nice if they did maybe include some sort of box that they know it's waterproof. So if you're using it with batteries, if you're using with an AC power cord from the bottom, that you're going to be okay. So that is going to be something that's going to be left up to you should you be using it in an actual torrential downpour. But generally speaking, I don't think people are going to be using it this way, because I think the people that are going to benefit from this the most is product videographers or product photographers that specifically deal with waterproof items, whether they are radios, earbuds, maybe a laptop, I don't know. If they're actually going to be doing stuff where they're showing off this thing underwater, then yes, this is where this LED panel is going to be very beneficial, because in those situations, the photographer and the producer have full control. They have a little pool, they have a tank, they have something where the light is actually being drenched into, and therefore, the nice long power cord that comes away with it is not going to be anywhere close to the water source itself. Now, that being said, this is just probably the part of me that wants to be extra safe. if there's actually going to be a human being inside the water, I would say I would only use V-mount batteries to power this LED panel instead of plugging it into continuous AC power. And that's just me going, heaven forbid that something does happen and water gets in and shorts out the thing, and electricity and water is not a good thing. I would rather it come from a V-mount battery where it's limited by its amperage and that has short circuit protection, over amperage protection. That way it cuts off right away, whereas if it's plugged into an AC power delivering continuous power into the unit, yeah, that's just me being extra cautious. So anyways, that being said, that's where I see this LED panel working for. If you're on a narrative film and you do work in the elements that's not controlled by you, then this is something for you to think about. If you are a product videographer or product photographer that specifically works with things that are meant to go underwater, then this is something you should be definitely looking into so that you have more control of lighting, because once light enters from the outside hitting water, you lose a lot of light transmission pretty quickly. So getting that light into the water is definitely going to help you for your needs. And hey, that is it for this week, everybody. If this video has made all the influence in your purchasing decisions, I would truly appreciate it if you check out my Amazon affiliate links down below. Again, this costs nothing extra to you. It just gives me a little compensation so I can continue making videos like this for you. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave it down below. I will get to them as fast as I can. And until then, like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you guys in the next one.